Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing a GeForce RTX 5060 Ti 16GB GPU in Assassin's Creed Shadows. This one is the Palit Infinity³ version of the card. I am running it with the latest Nvidia drivers and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Ups GPU-Z, and over on the left I am pairing it with the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D CPU and 32GB of RAM to avoid CPU bottlenecks. Let's get into it, shall we? And let's go over the settings first. I am starting at the 1080p resolution here, and I'm also going to utilize 1440p and 4K in this video. DLSS is set to DLAA at the moment, or native AA, and I'm using DLSS 4 as well in the Nvidia app to override it, because it looks sharper this way. And right now we're not using frame generation, motion blurs and stuff like that. And over on the scalability settings, or the advanced settings, we're using the Benchmark King's optimized settings. By the way, yes, ray tracing is enabled indeed. It's set to diffuse everywhere. It's on medium quality and BVH is set to high. And if you disable it completely or choose diffuse hideout only, for example, it looks way worse, as you can see here in this little comparison on the right. So you'll want this enabled for it to look like a proper next-gen title, basically. Otherwise, it's just ugly. Anyways, also, in terms of performance, ray tracing on and off doesn't really affect things by all that much in this title, okay? And you lose like 5 to 10 frames per second whenever you enable. It's not like half the performance like in some other titles. Now, let's start counting our FPS, and guys, this is a bit disappointing that it doesn't get 60 frames per second, but again, ray tracing is enabled, so there's that, and we can still utilize like frame generation and DLSS, which I highly recommend you to do so, especially the frame generation, because in this title, latency with FG enabled actually works really well. It's pretty low, even when you're down to like 40 FPS baseline without enabling that frame generation. So as long as you have 40 plus FPS all of the time, I do recommend frame gen to be enabled here, and we are obviously well above 40 frames per second all of the time here with the 5060 Ti, so that's pretty good of a baseline performance here. Let's call Roach. Hello, Roach. How's it going, buddy? I have seen a couple of little stutters there in the frame time graph already, by the way, especially inside of town, but nothing game-breaking, really. It's actually still pretty playable, and 99% of the time it's a smooth experience here in Assassin's Creed Shadows. That vegetation looks really pretty, actually, although at 1080p, not that much, but at higher resolutions, it looks really gorgeous, this title. Also, there is a little bit of lack of vegetation compared to like the very high settings preset, or ultra high settings preset, actually. Yeah, that's the maximum in this game. So yeah, I can see a bit more pop in here using optimized settings, but I mean, if you want to utilize ultra high settings in this game, obviously the performance will be a lot worse. It's already not at 60 plus FPS all of the time, so I do recommend these optimized settings. I mean, these are Benchmark King's settings after all, so they're optimized to get the best visuals to performance ratio, basically. And well, it's just a little bit of a shame once again that we can't really get 60 plus with this GPU. I thought it was going to be a little bit faster here in this game as well, but well, the game is not really that optimized, really, as you can see, right? Let's stop it right there. 60 FPS average, 1% loss of 45. Again, that's a good baseline for us to enable frame generation. In terms of VRAM, by the way, it's totally under control. Obviously, this is the 16GB card, so no problems there whatsoever. You can use ray tracings and frame generations and stuff like that. It just gives you peace of mind, you know, compared to, say, a 12GB card, where at 1440p with ray tracing and frame generation and stuff like that might struggle a little bit to keep it under 12GB of VRAM allocation, although this game doesn't really have much of an issue with that, though. Now, I can't really count the FPS here because the 1% lows are going to be wrecked instantly. As you can see, this is the new frame generation that's being utilized, the new model of it, basically, and it paces the frames differently from the previous frame generation technology, from the 40 series, for example. And also the FSR FG that gives us a flat line, not this huge thick boy of a graph, you know, but this is still really smooth, as you can see. In terms of responsiveness, as I told you, this game is different from others. You know, in other titles you require like 60 FPS baseline for you to enable frame generation and get acceptable input lags, you know. But in this title, 40 FPS is absolutely enough. It seems like they actually made the game with frame generation in mind. And well, even though I don't like when developers do that, you know, because games should be optimized native and then use DLSS and frame generations to enhance the experience and the smoothness and stuff like that. At least it's a good implementation in this one, and it feels really nice. It also doesn't look artifacty whatsoever. It doesn't look softer than native resolution, maybe just a tiny bit, but it's really hard to tell the difference, guys. Obviously the YouTube compression is just gonna wreck everything, so yeah, you can't really see what I'm seeing, unfortunately. But trust me, it actually does look really good. Just a little bit noisy, but it also was a little bit noisy at native resolution in the grass and stuff. That's probably because of the 1080p resolution, actually. Overall, smooth experience here, and the frame generation is definitely a go. Also, going back to that 1% lows talk and the new frame generation, pacing frames and stuff, we're getting 49 FPS, 1% lows on the MSI Afterburner, and over on the top right, that's the Nvidia overlay, by the way, and you can see that the 1% lows are super stable at 95, 96, 88 right there, 91, so no problems whatsoever. This is just due to the frame pacing taking place somewhere else after where MSI Afterburner takes place in terms of the readings, you know, the 1% lows, FPS averages, the readings of the GPU utilizations and stuff like that, that takes place before the frame pacing takes place now with the flip metering technology. Anyway, that's about it for 1080p resolution. We could do like medium settings, we could do like high settings preset, but again, this is basically a blend of medium, high, and a couple of very high settings or ultra high settings like textures, because we got enough VRAM for that. So yeah, these are definitely the way to go, basically. So let's just go up to the 2560 by 1440 resolution, which is an adequate resolution for this card. Still, I actually made my full review on it at 1440p. It did a fine job. 50, 60 FPS in most games, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. But yeah, it's super stable, and with some DLSS, it is actually performing well at 1440p resolution, or at least decently, you know. It's not performing as well as I wanted it to perform for $430, which is its MSRP, but in reality it's like 600. That sucks. But yes, guys, it should have at least matched the RTX 4070 in my opinion, and it didn't, and that's why it was so disappointing to me, because, you know, matching the RTX 4070 would just be a meh kind of performance improvement over last generation, right? Not really anything groundbreaking like GTX 1060, for example, a 6GB model matching GTX 980. Yeah, this ended up only being a little bit faster than the RTX 4060 Ti 16GB, and also, yeah, a little bit behind the RTX 4070, which I thought it would match. That's why I was so disappointed. Anyway, it's actually getting darker right now, so I'm gonna load the previous game. And here we are, during the day again. Very beautiful colors and stuff, and maybe slightly more intensive because of the shadows and stuff. But yeah, as you can see, in other games, when you go from 1080p resolution to 1440p resolution, you usually don't see a small performance decrease, right? It's a way bigger decrease in performance than what we're seeing here with the RTX 5060 Ti and Assassin's Creed Shadows. It's not due to the GPU itself, it's just the game, actually, that doesn't scale very much between resolutions and also settings, actually, if we're honest here. Again, like ray tracing only gives you a slightly higher FPS if you disable it, so yeah, this is a pretty weird title when it comes to the scaling, in my opinion. Power utilization is a little bit higher than what it was at 1080p as well. That's another thing about this game. It doesn't seem to utilize the 50 series cards to their fullest potential. However, the 5060 Ti almost pretty much never got up to 180 watts, which is its TDP. That's a massive stutter there, just game related. Once again, we got no CPU bottlenecks, no RAM bottlenecks, no drive bottlenecks. This is on SSD, of course, and also no VRAM bottlenecks, so it's just the game being inconsistent here. But as I was saying, this is a pretty efficient GPU that doesn't really reach up to its TDP in the vast majority of titles, actually. And here, it's no exception. The thing with Assassin's Creed Shadows, however, is even the RTX 5080, for example, was 100 watts below its TDP, or more than that sometimes. And that was a little bit concerning, so I'm not sure if this game is that well optimized for 50 series GPUs, unfortunately. It's pretty weird. I'm noticing that the horse is kind of lagging for rubber banding. This isn't an online title, so I'm not sure why it's lagging like that. It's really weird. So maybe they just broke the game with a recent update or something. Maybe with a restart it will be fixed. So I guess I'm gonna try that out. Alright guys, I just restarted the game. We're back here at 1440p. Oh yeah, the rubber banding is still happening here. I'm not sure if the capture card sees that as well as I see it, but yeah. I mean, that's really weird. FPS are really kind of the same still. Frame times seem to be a little bit better actually after the restart. So maybe after applying a new resolution, I'll start restarting this game. Kind of weird. Anyway, here the baseline is still alright for us to enable frame generation on top of, but I think enabling quality DLSS first is actually a better idea, because again, I overrode it. It's using DLSS 4 right now, and it actually works really well in this title. It looks just a little bit worse than native resolution. As usual, DLSS 4, the super resolution, is really good at upscaling, and it looks really close to native res, actually, aside from at 1080p resolution. But at 4K, quality DLSS, for example, is really pretty much the same as native res. At 1440p, it works quite well still. I can notice a bit of a difference still, but it's not major, and this way we can actually achieve a few higher FPS, as you can see, around 10 to 15 frames per second higher. So it's pretty much getting what we got at 1080p native resolution right now. I mean, if you're fine with a couple of drops from 60 FPS into the 50s and even 40s at times, it's going to be a stable experience. 60 FPS average. I mean, it's not terrible. It's not great either for, again, a 2025 $430 GPU that costs $600 in reality. But it's not terrible either, okay? It's not absolutely awful of an experience. Again, it's just disappointing in my opinion for the GPU, but we gotta keep in mind the game is not well optimized, so there's that as well. At least we can make it really good now when enabling frame generation on top of quality DLSS at 1440p resolution. This will give us pretty much the same FPS, maybe slightly lower FPS than what we saw with 1080p resolution with frame generation on top of DLAA. And on a 1440p monitor, it will look better like this than the LAA would on a 1080p monitor, if I make myself understandable. You know, you can have a 1080p 24-inch monitor with a PPI of 93 or I think it's not 90, 91 or 89, something like that. And the game with DLAA will look sharp, it will look detailed and stuff, but a 1440p 27-inch monitor, for example, with a PPI of 109, I think, will look better even when using DLSS quality plus frame generation on top of it. So you're gaining visuals by upgrading your monitor, and you're not really losing performance whatsoever here by using quality DLSS at 1440p. DLSS for super resolution is at a point where it's really worth enabling in a lot of titles. I could definitely enjoy some Assassin's Creed Shadows here on the RTX 5060 Ti, obviously. I mean, this GPU just came out. It should be capable of playing pretty much everything, especially at 1440p, because Nvidia actually targeted this at 1440p gaming. They showed a lot of slides and comparisons to the 3060 Ti. There's that laggy feel again. That's really weird, guys. I'm not sure why it's happening. It doesn't make sense to me. It looks like I have ping, but this game is not online, so yeah. But yeah, they showed a lot of comparisons at 1440p to the 3060 Ti and 4060 Ti, and well, it does do a decent job at 1440p, and it also has 16 gigabytes of memory, so that's kind of a waste at 1080p in my opinion. That's the experience here with frame generation. Input lag is really good still. Almost negligible, honestly. Big stutter there, lowering the 1% lows on the top right there. But now they're good. They're at 70s, 80s, as you can see. No problems whatsoever. Latency shows 0 milliseconds, so can't really tell you the actual latency results, unfortunately. But trust me, it's pretty good. So let's disable the frame generation now, and let's try it at the 4K resolution. I've seen some people saying that they play games at 4K resolution with the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB GPU, and yeah, it does have the memory to do that. I mean, I'm not sure how people already got their hands on 5060 Ti. I mean, I posted my full review yesterday. This is coming a couple of days afterwards, but yeah, I've seen some people commenting on my full review saying that they got the 5060 Ti, they're playing at 4K resolution, it's a good experience. Maybe they are. I mean, this is not terrible, although this is not true native 4K, because we're still using DLSS quality, alright? So I'm gonna do DLAA first to see native resolution results. And, well, at native resolution, obviously, it's 4K. It's way too much for a little card like this, especially with below 4070 performance, right? So 4K is not gonna happen, really, at native resolution, especially when you enable ray tracing at the same time. This is normal, you know, it's expected in my opinion, especially given that even super high-end GPUs also dropped from 60 FPS and even 30 FPS, like 5070 Ti at 4K max settings. It was dropping from 30 FPS. Anyway, if you're looking for a cinematic experience, well, this is it. Native resolution at 4K looks gorgeous, and it gets you those 24 plus FPS. Very cinematic indeed. Also, I'm seeing a little bit more stuttering now, so I'm just gonna restart the game. And now that we're back here, let's try it. You know what? I was gonna say quality. We already tried it for a little bit on quality. It wasn't that great. It was 30 FPS though, so if you want 30 FPS experience, sure, go for quality. But performance DLSS still looks really good here in this title, especially because we overrode the DLSS, of course, and it's DLSS 4. It works really well. And even though the performance DLSS is actually upscaling from 1080p resolution all the way up to 4K, this is nowhere near 1080p visuals, guys. This is still better than 1440p, actually. So if you have a 1440p monitor running this game at native resolution with DLAA next to a 4K monitor running DLSS performance at 4K, the DLSS performance at 4K on a 4K monitor will look better, alright? I have done this a ton of times. I've done these experiments, you know, off camera, of course. I have a lot of monitors, and I actually review monitors from time to time, so I know what I'm talking about. I would much rather have a 4K performance DLSS experience than a 1440p native experience. That's pretty crazy, I know. The only drawback that I can see here of performance DLSS at 4K resolution is the hair of the character is pretty muddy, you know, it's really soft. That's weird as heck. But aside from that, everything else is really sharp. There's no pixelation. There's minimal noise in these grassy areas and stuff. I mean, we got a ton of grass moving all over the place, and it's still really sharp overall. There's a ton of detail there. DLSS 4 does an amazing job, once again, as an upscaler. It really is night and day compared to previous generations of DLSS, and also compared to like FSR and XeSS. This is leagues ahead of those technologies as well. I'm not sure about FSR 4, by the way. I've never tested that, or a 90 series GPUs, or 9000 series GPUs, that's it, from AMD. However, look at what I got! Yes, guys! We got the 9070, not the XT version, but I'm gonna be working on a review of that next week, so expect that video coming next week. So yeah, it's gonna be great. But as I was saying, I haven't tried FSR 4, so my opinions on FSR is just based on FSR 3 or 3.1, and in this game, for example, those work really badly. XeSS as well. But anyway, as you can see, this is actually super playable, and it gets us 40 plus frames per second all of the time. The 100% lows are at 42 frames per second. We ran through the woods, we ran through the city area, and it's stable. It stutters slightly, just the same as the other resolutions did anyways. And I think we should enable frame generation on top of this. It won't be as responsive as the other resolutions, because at 4K it usually doesn't quite double your FPS. It's doing a really good job though, probably because of the VRAM helping it, I don't know. 11 gigs right there, so even a 12GB GPU would be fine, honestly, with these settings. Yeah, this... Never mind, guys. I mean, yeah, we're getting like, what, 10 FPS lower than what we saw at the 1080p resolution. Let me bring up the 1% lows there on the top right. Yeah, we're getting 10 FPS less than at 1080p resolution with frame generation enabled and DLAA. But now we're at 4K performance DLSS with frame generation over here in this area. Yeah, it starts dropping into the low 70s. I keep moving the camera a lot just to feel the input lag once again. Not bad though. Even though it's 70 FPS, it's nowhere close to the input lag that you would get, for example, in a Stalker 2. I'm not saying the card is amazing or anything. It definitely isn't. It isn't even great in my opinion. It's good that it came down in price compared to the 4060 Ti 16GB, but it's not good that it's only like 15% faster and it doesn't even match the 4070 by another 15%, by the way. It's 15% slower than 4070 as well. There's a huge difference there between 4060 Ti and 4070. So yeah, performance, the native performance should have been better on this 5060 Ti GPU in my opinion, but it can still play games like Assassin's Creed Shadows, even at 4K resolution apparently. I mean 4K resolution, but these are 4K visuals. So there's that, guys. This is actually a really good surprise. I thought it was going to struggle a bit more here at 4K resolution, getting lower FPS, even with performance DLSS, but it seems to be absolutely fine, in my opinion, as long as you use that frame generation. And I don't like when games rely on that, but again, at least this game's implementation of frame generation is really good, so you can definitely enjoy it. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Catch you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.